John, can you tell us about the emergency order that the ABC is pushing through now and how that's affecting licensing holders?
Well, the potential effect is the ABC is changing the rules on due process for violations of the ABC Act. Essentially, they will be able to shut a licensee down after a hearing on 5 days' notice. The license doesn't even necessarily have to be at the hearing. The hearing doesn't have to be conducted live, and the penalty would be pretty much instantly served. In other words, the license would be suspended, whether it's a winery, a brewery, distillery, a bar, a restaurant, whatever the license holder happens to be, um, subject to an appeal to a superior court in the county in which the license exists. The problem with this is the superior courts don't do ABC law, don't do ABC regulatory work. They've actually been specifically prevented from doing that since 1954, when the ABC Act was adopted, that vested sole jurisdiction for appeals of ABC violations in something called the ABC Appeals Board. And so what they're doing is they're changing the rules of the road. Emergencies are one thing, but these aren't emergencies. These are general violations, whether it's disorderly house, a neighbor that's making too much noise, sale of an alcohol to a minor. And by the way, the most recent yesterday release from the ABC is that they're going to be doing stings on delivery drivers. In other words, if you're a winery or a restaurant or what have you, and you're having alcohol delivered from your premises to a customer at their home, that customer might be an underage decoy. And if the delivery driver doesn't ask for an ID and check the identification, both the delivery driver would be liable for criminal violation of furnishing alcohol to a minor, and the underlying licensee would be liable for sale of an alcoholic beverage to a minor. 3 sales of an alcoholic beverage to a minor in 36 months and your license is revoked. That's a pretty serious penalty. There's a lot of case law on the proper way to conduct a minor decoy sting, but this is a pretty significant move by the ABC if they're actually going to set up these stings. We have cases right now where merchants are being charged with violation of the ABC Act for selling alcohol to a couple, where one member of the couple was 20 years old, the other's over 21. And because the 20-year-old accompanied the 21-year-old, and the assumption was that the clerk was actually furnishing a 20-year-old, and the store is liable for that against their license. So this is it's fraught with peril. And to set up a sting operation under these particular circumstances, this particular time, is probably not well advised. I mean, for example, what if someone refuses to come to the door because they don't want to be exposed to the delivery driver? They say, leave it outside. Well, the delivery driver is going to have to take the package away, and most of them haven't been instructed to do that. Most of them just leave the package at the door. And if someone does answer the door, they have a mask on, and they have to remove their mask. I mean, there's so many pieces to this that I think it's not a responsible regulatory approach at this particular time to take that particular action. And the emergency regulations themselves need to be responded to at the Office of Administrative Law by Tuesday, May 25th. And the AOL may, in fact, deny the new regulations, and they should deny them. There's almost universal industry opposition to changing the rules of the road at this particular point. If the ABC wants legislation to change the ABC Act, that's one thing, and that can be pursued through the legislature. But to do it by this emergency rulemaking procedure, again, is not a responsible action on the part of the agency itself, and exposes licensees throughout the state to uh, uh, to violations that they're not going to be able to defend themselves against.
And you mentioned in your blogging about this, about how this could also have a negative impact on the deliveries companies and how they've been more open to doing
Well, I
deliveries.
mean, again, would I be? Let's talk about the adoption of a rule allowing decoy stings as urgency actions and taking emergency violations premised on a minor decoy, trying to accept a delivery of alcohol, cocktail, or a bottle of wine, or from a winery, or from a beer from a distillery. All the things that have been given permission to do during this particular crisis. I'm a delivery driver. Do I want to be exposed to that particular liability? If I'm Federal Express and UPS, um, do I want to send drivers out to be arrested if they don't ask for ID? I mean, they're not trained clerks. They're delivery drivers, and it also includes all the various delivery services. And I don't think any of them even know that this has been proposed. This came out yesterday, and it's to be effective. ABC's got 5 days now to review that particular proposal, and then they send it to the Office of Administrative Laws, which will be next week, and there'll be another 5-day period at the OAL to review, and this could literally be effective within 2 weeks, and without anybody knowing about it. And the delivery driver aspect of it is pretty significant, because right now most goods are going to consumers in California delivery services.
So, what do you think people should do now? Is
Well,
there
I
still
think that
time
there
to?
should be. I think there should be a legislative response. I think that this needs to be responded to by the legislature. I mean, I understand where the ABC is coming from. They want to enforce these particular laws. They have the opportunity to do so through their normal uh, um, uh, ABC violation process, where they file an accusation. You have a right to get a copy of the discovery report where you can defend the accusation, where if the legal standards that applied aren't proper, you have a chance to appeal to the ABC Appeals Board, and from there to the courts. But by flipping it, saying, well, we can give you, we're going to decide beforehand and penalize you immediately, and maybe later you can have the right to appeal, but you've already served the penalty. Flips the whole process on its head. I think that the delivery driver thing alone is a really serious issue, and it should be considered by the legislature. I think the department would be well advised to back off here a little bit and to get into dialogue with the major industry trade associations over how they can deal with these particular issues. No one objects to the department fulfilling its mission to make sure that alcohol is sold safely and responsibly in the state of California. That's not the point. The point is to have consistent policies that are understood and are capable of being followed, and to have protocols and legal in place for resolution of relations that are fair, that provide for the right to be represented, that for licensees to have an opportunity to make their case, and for rules that are clear. Applying minor decoy rules to delivery drivers that's a disaster waiting to happen.
The next comment round ends on Tuesday, the 25th. Is that correct?
25th. Yeah, that's for the first set of comments on the emergency regulations altogether. The second set will be after that on the delivery driver issue, which just came out. They also want emergency regulations on that. So getting comments in by Tuesday to the ABC on their regulatory proposals would be, I think, would be very helpful. And the address is on the blog post that we posted on booze rules on beveragelaw.com. And get your comments in. That's my advice to the industry: is let the let the Office of Administrative Laws know what you think. We did a thorough analysis of the regulations, and um, in our letter, our comment letter, which is attached to our blog post, and generally speaking, they're not meeting the standards uh, um, of specificity required to have new emergency regulations in place. They're simply incorporating their normal enforcement um, uh, uh, powers, saying, well, we've got to have the right to execute our normal enforcement powers on an emergency basis, and immediately have have penalties to licensees. We don't see any need for that. I personally have not. Maybe the ABC can tell us, but they sure didn't put it in their materials. A whole bunch of people out there violating the law. We just haven't seen it.
Well, moving on to some of the more positive aspects of what's been happening at the ABC lately, there's been 4 rounds of regulatory relief come out.
Five now.
5 now.
Yeah.
What's the latest?
The latest is the one that came out yesterday from Rebecca.
Oh, is that the one about the expanded license footprint?
Yes, expanded license. Well, the expanded license put the one before. I mean, there's been 5 rounds. I mean, again, the ABC is being, in our view, um, uh, responsible in terms of regulatory relief, and we're not. This is reopening of the California restaurants. This came out yesterday, and that particular one has to do with the resiliency roadmap, as Rebecca called it, which is very positive on the part of the ABC, providing checklists. Um, Licensees with on-sale privileges expand their licenses to adjoining alleys and roads and streets and sidewalks, so there's more tables outside. I mean, this is really positive stuff. Uh, um, uh, and resuming business during phase 2 of licensing is positive on restaurants. Now, the question would be how many of these changes are going to be at the end of this period. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the positive results of having cocktails to go has been felt by restaurants and on-sale establishments throughout the state of California, and frankly, wineries, breweries, distillery tasting rooms. We're not turning the California certainly into the French Quarter of New Orleans, but the privileges have demonstrated that they haven't been abused. It's an incredibly valuable marketing and sales tool for the licensees that are going to be suffering through this pandemic for another year at least.
So
There's no question this is long term. This is needed long term.
yeah, so do you, for these relief actions that the APC has put out, you think that they'll possibly, is it within their scope to be able to push it beyond the COVID-19 pandemic's time?
No, at some particular point in time, there's going to be regulatory review. In other words, there either needs to be rulemaking to make the changes permanent, probably rulemaking would accomplish it, or statutory review. My recommendation would be, let's move it to the legislature. Let's have the legislature consider it. Let's build in a statute that dictates appropriate regulatory relief should be granted on a permanent basis, and then let's use the rulemaking process to fill out the details. But this should go through the legislature. Frankly, that's the people's representatives, and those are the people that are most concerned with it. But we have a long ways to go, Kim. I mean, there's we have a year and a half on the COVID matter alone, in terms of people having confidence to go out and to again to be entertained and to go to tasting rooms and to go to restaurants, go to events. So there's a lot between here and there. The regulatory is good. Um, instant uh, um, uh, violation under emergency regulations is not necessary. That's our bottom line here. But the ABC, they're doing good things. The regulatory relief is welcomed, and it's respectable. And hopefully the lessons that will be learned by the operation of the regulations during the period that they've been relieved, if you will, when the enforcement is relaxed, will be so positive that they figure out at the end of this time that enforcement is no longer required, and the regulations themselves are no longer required. I mean, the ABC Act has been built on like a reef over the course of the last, if you have an ocean analogy here, it's accreted. The regulations have accreted since the 1950s, and they just keep building, and you don't get rid of them. And maybe it's time for a complete review, so we can get rid of a lot of those accreted, unnecessary regulations that date back a long ways. That would be a very good thing, but that really can't be done by the ABC. That's not their job. That's the legislature's job.
Okay. Well, thank you for this overview of what's happening at the APC, John. Do you have any final words of action for people watching this?
Yes, be very careful out there. It's very dangerous. Read the material. When you're operating under a regulatory relief statute, be very careful that you operate completely within the guidelines that have been given. Understand that those guidelines could go away at any time, so be careful how you build that into your model. The ABC has, in fact, said that they can reverse any of the regulatory relief guidelines on day's notice. So pay attention to what the ABC is doing. And that's the best advice I have, is to keep very close track of what's going on in the regulatory. And the trade associations, whether it's the Wine Institute of Family Winemakers, National Association of Wine Retailers, California Retailers, California Restaurant Association, pay very close attention to them. They're there for the licensees, and they're keeping track of this information, and they should be contacted for assistance as it goes along. Okay, I mean, you don't have a licensee to put in comments. Anybody that's interested in the industry should put in comments.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate
Thank you, Kim.
taking the time.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Okay.
I look forward to your editing.